Beginning C++ Through Game Programming, second edition. This was actually the book. I remember this weird yellow skeleton-like hand thing. I'm not totally sure what it is, but programming books are always kind of abstract covers. And I got that book, went through it, and looking back on the table of contents when I was preparing for this, I realized I never finished this book. I only read about half of it, and some of the concepts later on, I definitely did not learn those back in 7th grade. And this was when I first realized that my biggest enemy was creeping up. My biggest enemy, whether it was subconscious or consciously, I never finished that book. I chose to not finish that book and stopped programming for quite a while. But about 4 years later, in high school, I took the intro programming class at high school. And when I was there, I worked a little bit, working on some assignments. After about a month or so, I finished up the assignments fairly quickly and asked my teacher, hey, can I work on a side project? Can I work on a game? This is the thing that I want to do. This is the thing that I love, and I want to do more of this. And he said, sure, you sure can. And so then I stopped doing assignments, probably wasn't okay with school, but stopped doing the assignments and started working on my side project pretty much exclusively. And I actually managed to find the source code for this game that I wrote in 2011. And this is actually a snippet of the source code, and I really, really hope that my programming is better now, not nesting for loops inside for loops inside for each loops. And I specifically remember when this code ran on the school computers, whenever an enemy exploded, the game would freeze for about a second, and then it would lurch forward 20 frames. So it was quite enjoyable. But at this point, most of my learning was making it up as I went along, just figuring out what worked and what didn't work. And at this point, looking back, I thought that I would have crept up on myself again, but actually, no, it wasn't. And I think a lot of that was due to my teacher allowing me to do the things that interested me and what I wanted to do. And just a quick little demo, I actually got the code running, and this was actually the game that I wrote in 2011, and that's pretty much the whole game. But next up was college applications, and I applied to only 2 schools. I applied to the University of Washington, which I never actually submitted, and the Art Institute of Portland. And going through the deciding factors of what I did and didn't want to do, there was UW, which was well-known, quality education, had plenty of awesome people, clearly, tons of opportunities for mentorship, for clubs, for sports, but there was no game development major, as opposed to the Art Institute, which had a game development major. And the UW had a multi-essay application. You had to apply to your major afterwards. It was hard and competitive to get in, but the Art Institute had no essay. You were instantly in your major, got what you wanted, and you can guess which one I went for. And when I got there, I quickly realized that all that low effort I put in delivered on low results. For some context, the Art Institute had very long classes, about 2 to 3 hours, 1 to 2 days a week. It was mostly project work with lots of downtime, and my schedule mostly looked like this. I was doing the thing I loved, but I wasn't producing any of the things that I needed to produce, and ended up only averaging a 3.9 GPA, mainly because of a drawing class, and I learned I'm not good at drawing. And this is where typically I would creep on myself again and say that I was preventing myself from doing the things that I want to do and be the person I want to be because of this low effort. But for whatever reason, I decided that that's not what I wanted. I didn't want this. I wanted to put more effort into things and get more results out of it. So I dropped out of the Art Institute. I moved back in with my parents, probably one of the most personally embarrassing things of my life, of admitting that I had chosen wrong. I had made a mistake in going to this school and deciding that. So moved back in with my parents, went to a local community college for a few quarters, and then eventually put in more effort and applied to the University of Washington, and thankfully, since I'm here now, was able to get accepted into university and eventually got accepted into informatics. And all of this was a change from the first few quarters when I got in there, which I snuck up on myself again, of having not the greatest performance in the first few quarters, because I held the same schedule as the Art Institute of mainly doing a little bit of effort but a lot of other stuff that didn't get me the results I wanted. But since I actually got into informatics, obviously I changed that up after a few quarters and was able to put in more effort into my school and focus more on getting the results that I wanted to get. And after that, probably a little more relevant to people here right now, was job applications. And for this one, I knew that I didn't want the same story as with college. I didn't want to put in low efforts and get some mediocre job that I leave after a year or so because it's terrible and it's not getting what I want. So I started to apply. Despite the career fairs, which are very great and you should go to them, I didn't get any substantial offers or anything. I didn't get very far in the career finding process due to those fairs. So once it hit about spring break of my senior year, I decided that the whole spring break, I wasn't going to take a break and instead find a job, because it was starting to get towards the end and I was getting worried that I wasn't going to find a job. So I applied to Microsoft. I never heard back. Applied to VMware, and I never heard back. Applied to Azuqua. I did hear back, but ended up rejecting due to the low amount of effort it took me to get an offer there. Not speaking ill of them, but turned that down. Cisco, didn't get an offer from them. Even though I had interned there the previous summer, I wasn't able to get a position there since they weren't hiring. And many, many more. I sent out dozens of applications and contacted plenty of companies and had many, many interviews, and most of them either didn't get back to me or got back to me and I had maybe one interview, only to never hear back from them again. And after about a month after spring break, I've been okay. I tried my best. I put in all this effort, and I thought I was going to get high results out of it. Previously I put in low effort and gotten low results, and I thought this would give me, better results. But it didn't actually come until I contacted one of my old professors, an Android dev professor here at the high school. He's a temp professor, so he's not official faculty. But I had talked to him and said, hey, I remember you worked for that one company, it was like Smartsheet, and are you hiring there? Are there any job opportunities? And he's like, oh, yes, of course. And because I had put in effort into his class, he remembered me, and I was able to talk to him and eventually get a referral to Smartsheet, went there, interviewed, went through the entire process and prepared for it until eventually I got a job, and that leads me up to where I am right now. So since everyone's sitting here listening to my life story summarized in about 15 minutes, you're probably all sitting there and thinking possibly, hey, that's cool, Cameron, those are some cool lessons that you've learned, but, what does that apply to anyone else here? You didn't go to the University of Portland. If you did, that'd be pretty impressive. But I think that ultimately, even though this is my story about my journey into the technology field, I think there are some things that we can all apply and that I personally apply every day at work and outside of work as best I can. And one of those is to seek challenge. If you're constantly putting in low effort into something, sure, you might get by a little bit. When I first went to the Art Institute, everything was going well so far. I was getting a college degree, I was going to classes, I was learning things, but I was learning things slowly and things weren't progressing as well as I wanted, and I wasn't getting the results I wanted. And even at work now, I constantly make sure that I'm seeking a challenge, that things are challenging me, and if not, I need to go somewhere else and find that challenge. As well as being able to change course, of not being afraid that saying that I made a mistake and owning up to those mistakes and deciding that I need to make a change for the better. As well as finding motivators. And I was trying to come up with a word for this since in my mind it's not just a mentor as described previously, but someone who can be there for you and push you in a certain direction. My teacher in high school, while wasn't providing direct mentorship, allowed me the chance to be able to pursue what I enjoyed and do what I like. So ultimately, this is my story from games to grids and some lessons that I learned along the way. Hopefully someone was able to get something out of this, and if not, I hope you enjoyed a 15-minute story about my life. Thank you.